Hello and welcome to the Pelimiitti Loves Assembly Weeks. It's Wednesday and we are back here to another program. I am your host, Kari Jääskelä. I would like to remind all the watchers watching from home office even, that you can participate in this stream through the Twitch chat, and please do be active in the social media and use the hashtags Pelimiitti, hashtag Pelimiitti Loves Assembly, and hashtag #AssemblyWinter21. So today's discussions topic will be gaming and accessibility. And joining me, your host, are Felicia Byrne, producer in animation studio Nopia, and musician going by the name MC Lisia, an absolute player and streamer of Tekken 7 and a data gnome. Say hello to the stream.
Hello.
Hello.
So we are off for a great start. First off, both of you, could you tell briefly about your gaming and other background? When you first started playing, what games did you play and what kind of role gaming hobby has presented in your lives?
Who first?
Let's say...
You can go first.
Okay, sure. So, hi everybody, I'm Felicia Byrne. I've been playing video games, I would say, since I was like 3 years old, 3 or 4 years old. I have a brother who is 10 years older than me. So when he was a young, edgy teenager, I was an inquisitive, curious baby, basically, and I wanted to do exactly what he did and play exactly what he played, which had its ups and downs. I'm also blind from birth, so I can't see very well, and I still have enjoyed video games. I now work in the game industry as a producer and a community manager. I've been doing community management for like 17 years, and production of mobile games and animation for the past 5.5. I also do music. I would like to eventually do more gaming, sound design, and audio stuff, but for now, my music and my game hobbies have been pretty separate. And I play right now a lot of Animal Crossing, I think, as the rest of the world has. Also, Among Us, those have become my quarantine games, but I play a lot of N64, believe it or not. That is sort of like my main thing still. I've always been an N64 fan, and I don't think that's going to change. And that's me in a nutshell,
you actually have a Nintendo 64 console that you use. Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I do.
Is it still possible to get new controllers for it?
I order from Germany whenever I want anything, and I seem to be able to get pretty much any controller or game or accessory that I want from Germany without any trouble. So
good. So, absolutely. How about you?
So my first gaming memory is this picture that has been taken me at like a 4-year-old with PlayStation 1 pad in my hands, upside down. I was starting playing soon as I was able to hold the controller. First memory of me playing something. Because we were just moving in our new home, we had to set up the PlayStation 1 in the hallway for me to play, because no other room was available yet. So we had to set this big tube TV and everything to hallway, middle of it, to me to play some NHL or whatever it was. That is my first memory.
Yeah, and been playing ever since.
I've been playing ever since. There's 3 different phases, I would say. When I was young, I was playing sports games. Teenager, I was playing RPGs. And adult, I'm playing fighting games. So, and now it's a mix of all 3.
Oh, so you're getting back to the roots.
Yeah, right. I like playing these old sports games just to live a bit of my childhood again, or something like that.
Oh, well, sometimes coming back to your childhood is not very good when you try to play old games. Oh, I remember this was such a good game, and retrying it is maybe not so good. Sometimes it's better to leave it to the memory.
Yeah.
Well, since you two both have been playing pretty much ever since you have been able to hold a controller, what kind of difficulties have you had relating to the games and playing, and how have you solved these problems?
So for me, of course, being blind, it's always been about the size of things and contrast and everything having to do with visuals. I remember being a kid and being a huge Pokemon fan and not being able to play any of the games on Game Boy, for example, like Pokemon Blue or Red or anything, because I just cannot see a Game Boy screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too small and the contrast is bad and everything is bad. So it wasn't until I think like 2001 when I got Pokemon Stadium and I was able to get the adapter for the back of the N64 controller that allowed me to play Pokemon Yellow on a CRT television, which blew my mind because I was like, what is going on? And like all my cousins and stuff were like, you're only now playing Pokemon Yellow? And you know, it made me feel very behind the time, if you will. But, you know, for example, my brother played a lot of adventure games and old stuff on PC and Commodore 64 and stuff, and that's what I grew up playing. And with those, it was just a lot of reading tiny text on crappy monitors. And as technology improved, it became kind of like the opposite in a way, where it was these beautiful 3D super artistic worlds and super artistic fonts and everything is very artsy and beautiful, but visually just totally overwhelming and not very practical for somebody with a visual impairment. So I've always had to find, you know, workarounds and things like that. But it was only recently that I realized that my workarounds or primitive life hacks would all fall under the umbrella of accessibility features. That's a new word to me, and by new I mean the past 5 years. But once you get to a certain age, 5 years is new.
Indeed.
So
And how about Apsuli?
For me, it was like, because I have, you know, only one working hand, pretty much. So like, for me to find a pad that was suitable for my needs, or a way to hold a pad with like one hand. I remember not being able to play like a Nintendo 64 pretty well because the controller is super weird.
it's so weird, I know.
How do you supposed to hold that thing?
I don't know how I do it. Actually, it's funny you bring that up because like when I hadn't played N64 for like several years, and then I got one again after a long time of playing with the Switch controller and playing with the Xbox controller on PC, and like picking up an N64 controller, something I used every day for like 10 years. For the first time in 5 years, I was like, what am I even doing? How did I use this?
And since we have like improved with the controllers, now I don't know what it is, but PlayStation controllers, they designed it such a way that the triggers, if you hold the controller against the desk, the triggers will press.
Oh.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
Yeah.
But I transitioned over to Xbox pads, arcade sticks, but been playing almost, I don't remember a single game I didn't have to like stop playing or something because I couldn't. I always found a way to play it somehow.
Yeah. So where there is a will, there is a way.
Yeah.
Well, what does accessibility mean in games and game design then?
So this is something I actually get asked a lot, and I think there's still a really big misunderstanding in terms of what accessibility actually means in practice. So accessibility on the whole means that your game or your app is usable and functional in different situations where people might themselves find be disabled. So disability is situational. You know, in my experience, for me, I'm not disabled when I'm laying in bed thinking about pizza. That's actually a very happy place for me, but I'm not disabled in that moment. And similarly, for other people in certain situations when they're gaming, you know, they might find that they are either struggling more or struggling less. And because of this, accessibility in game design needs to be something that is very consciously thought about. There's no one size fits all. There's no one size answer. It's having settings and options and configurations available so that the people who need it have it and can turn it on. And so that
they have a choice to make, that if they want to use it, they can use it then.
Exactly. And so that their choice doesn't affect the overall experience they have in the game, because for a lot of players with disabilities and people who use accessibility features, we want to be able to play games with our friends, right? Like we want to be able to be a part of the culture, to be part of something, and to hang out with our friends and be part of society. So the ultimate goal of accessibility in games and apps and mobile games and whatever else is to ensure that everyone using this tool, regardless of their situation, regardless of their disability, is enjoying it at the same level as everyone else.
Yeah. So everyone, no regard what their level of disabilities or whatever hindrances they have in life, they are on the same playing field on the gaming industry.
They have the same right to an experience as everyone else.
One thought I want to throw out: accessibility is not difficulty necessarily. I want to get this across. Difficulty and accessibility are not the same thing. Not by long shot. No.
For some people, they are. I mean, for example, if you are a person who is dealing with sensory issues or neurological stuff, like there are people for whom difficulty and accessibility correlate, and I think that's definitely like a valid thing to consider. For example, if you have a game where it's a fighting game, for example, and your opponent in your fighting game is taunting you and they say, come on, and they are kind of like egging you on. For certain people with neurological differences, that might be too much for them, and that would be an accessibility feature if they could turn that off. So I think in most cases it's not related to difficulty, but in some cases it can be, and I think it's okay if it is. Because difficulty is relative, right? There's no such thing as a universally difficult or universally easy game. If you ask my mom, like a match 3 is probably really difficult, but for me, a match 3 is, child's play. So it's all about who you ask.
Funniest thing I found with the accessibility thing, I found Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, the new game from Software. You can actually make it accessible to my disability, at least. It was the most accessible From Software game I played, so that's why I brought it up. Like, it's the most difficult as well. But
regarded as a difficult game.
Regarded as difficult. But yeah, the options was enough to make it accessible to me, and I'm super happy with it. I got to experience the rush of beating that boss to bash your hind against like 2 hours straight, and then beat it.
That is quite a rush, isn't it? Well, that kind of segues to the next question. In today's game development, how well accessibility is taken into account? What things are fine and what needs more developing?
It's getting better and better, for sure. Excuse me. Like if you compare it to, like I said, 5 years ago when I started really campaigning and talking about this issue in Finland, no one was talking about it. And I was met with a lot of resistance from developers and even people who were well-meaning that said, oh, well, if we start thinking about accessibility, where do we draw the line? What happens to artistic freedom? What happens to this? And that very toxic attitude over the past 5 years has really changed. And I think part of what's driven that change is, studios like Naughty Dog who have just embraced accessibility and made it part of their pipeline. Part of it is coming from investors. A lot of investors have started to say that if you don't have a clear accessibility plan in your deck, then we might not invest in your game, for example. So there's a lot of conscious change that's been happening, thanks in part to activism from people like me and people much better at this than me, like Ian Hamilton, for example, and other people on accessible Twitter doing, the work and getting the message out there. But I think part of it is just a general waking up of people and starting to understand that, like, you know, there are situations where every one of us might need to have some kind of accessibility feature. And especially the older we get, the more likely we are to start having visual problems, for example, or mobility issues, for example. And some of us are not young anymore, which is terrifying to think about, but it's true. And I think a lot of people are starting to think about the future more, especially thanks to the current, you know, global situation. So I think it's getting better, but there's still a lot of work to do. Like, there's still a lot of bad attitudes out there. There are still a lot of companies that, for example, will try to use accessibility and their disabled workers as tokens for, you know, diversity points or whatever, which I think is disgusting. You know, there's a lot of work to do. But on the whole, I'm very pleased with how things are going. And I think in 5 years, you know, we might not even need accessibility panels. That's my dream, at least, that in 5 years, this is just a natural part of user experience or UX, and that we don't need separate panels for it.
Yeah.
Would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, things are improving after all. And that's a good thing. Well, we kind of already touched on this subject, but in which games do you think accessibility is in particularly well considered and why? And which games have particularly good options for accessibility? Max 2 games per player. Speaker, well, player and speaker, yes.
Yeah.
The Last of Us 2 is for a blind person. I mean, it's amazing. And part of it is because they did what a lot of studios don't do, and that is they consulted directly with different disabled players, including, for example, Steve Saylor, who's also a Twitch streamer who's amazing. The Blind Gamer, he's great, and he did a lot of consulting on that. And because of people like him, the at least visually impaired accessibility features in The Last of Us 2 are like, they're amazing. I don't know how else to explain other than amazing. So I don't need 2 games, I have 1, and that's it.
Okay.
For me, I was looking through all my games library, and one that stuck out was Insomniac Games' Ghost of Tsushima. It has options I haven't seen in a game, like ever. There is certain events in the game you have to mash a button. You can convert that to just holding button, or you can remove time limits on certain events.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Or you can change the visual presentation of the game. I don't know how much, I didn't delve through it. But you can change the holding a button to a single press, which allowed me to play the game on hard difficulty. First game I ever played in hard difficulty, and I had a fun time with it.
So cool.
So Ghost of Tsushima, it's a game I will go back to, like, straight after this, I think.
Since it's a good game after all. Yeah.
Okay,
Well, like the visual impairments are quite like common among people, in particularly like color blindness. And well, no one asked me, but I just wanted to bring up some small game that some of you have heard of, Among Us, maybe. And one of the tasks you have there is to connect wires. And no one made a big noise out of it, but I did notice that before you only had to connect wires and match color to color, but they did add some symbols to the both ends of them.
Yes, they
so
did.
Actually, no one made a big noise out of it, or like big Yahoo, we are thinking of colorblind people, but it's a nice touch that you can give to your games.
It was pretty quietly done, which is surprising because I think they're a British-based company, if I remember correctly, and like 16% of males in the UK are actually colorblind. So it's not a small segment of the population
and
that
still,
deals.
it's a pretty common like game design to just match color to color when you have like pretty quite often people can't really tell color from colors. Or
which is why there always should be patterns on top of the colors. And I think more and more this is becoming standard practice. I've like, for example, in match 3s, a lot of them used to just be match color to color, but now the things you're matching are color and shape or color and pattern. I think this is starting to become more widely considered, and it's such a simple thing to just add a pattern. So I don't understand why it isn't more like widely regarded. But I do have to say, in defense of Among Us, I do have friends who work on that project and who've been super eager and accepting of my accessibility feedback, and they do care a lot. It's just sometimes things are slow to change because that is just the nature of game development. Stuff that might seem like an easy fix sometimes isn't. So they do listen, and I think that's another thing that's important to remember, is that, you know, a lot of studios, people might have the best intentions in the world, but things are either slow to change, or there's one person blocking the change. There's one creative director somewhere that's like, no, this is my vision. And, you know, you can't do much about that, unfortunately. But I do think that kind of stuff is constantly improving. But the color blindness, I'm glad you brought it up, because it is a really big deal.
And it doesn't usually getting brought up, but you, like blind people or other disabilities, but such a common theme as color blindness is usually like disregarded.
Yeah.
Fighting games are so notorious for colorblind not like working because they have bunch of colors and everything like that. I hope to see it like fixed in some respects.
Anything with teams often has a problem with that, because it's usually like red team versus green team, and if you're colorblind, it's like team versus me. Okay, thanks, guys.
Indeed. Moving on a bit, how different gaming communities in different games, Twitch, etc., have responded to your visual impairment or cerebral palsy?
I think it depends very much on where on the internet I am. And I also have the unfortunate, or fortunate, depending on who you're asking, element that I am not a male. So not only am I disabled, but I'm a non-man on the internet. So with that comes its own set of fun.
Fun.
I think... Yes, fun. So I think, you know, for the kind of games that I play, people have been pretty supportive. Like, I had one post reach the top of the Animal Crossing subreddit like a year ago when I discussed how I kind of did some accessibility stuff on my island that the game did not natively support, but that I added myself through custom designs and stuff. And I've seen other blind people's islands as well reach the top of the subreddit. So I think certain communities are definitely really supportive of us existing, which is cool. And, you know, I'm very lucky in that a lot of the Discord servers I'm part of take ableism and hate speech against disabled people very seriously. But at the same time, I remember there was, I think it was the Bloodborne controversy from like 2 years ago. I think it was Bloodborne. Forgive me if it was Bloodborne, where they were talking about accessibility and difficulty features, and I actually had to delete Twitter for like several weeks because I was just done with that conversation. And people I care about and myself being called fake gamers, being called crybabies, being told I'm bad at video games, that we're ruining video games, which is why my Twitter bio to this day is still professional blind person out to ruin video games. So you kind of do have to learn how to roll with the punches, I guess, if you are a disabled person who exists anywhere, which sucks.
Yeah. The second most of that. And for me, because I mainly do Twitch as my like hobby thing, I am on the fighting game scene, which means it's 1-on-1. So I play against one other kid. So there's 2 ways this can go. He can come after the game to my stream, be like, you disabled, ruined my game, and you suck, and go die, and all that sort of stuff. I'm making it more like family friendly on the stream, but like, I can get, oh my god, you are so amazing. that's insane. You play this
Yeah,
game.
yeah, so it's one or the other almost.
There's two ways it can
Both
go.
make me uncomfortable though. I don't know how you feel about it, but like I'm really uncomfortable with being told I'm inspirational, amazing, this and that, because it's like I have no choice, my dude. Like I have to live like this. Like I do not have an on-off switch for being disabled. So like sure, if you think that's amazing, cool, but like that's also sort of ableist in a way, because that means that you assume that other people with my disability would not be able to do the things that I do. So I would on one hand, it's like the validation is cool. Like, yes, please tell me I'm the best in the world, but like have that relate to my skills in general,
not just
not the fact that I'm blind.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I would say. It depends how you like make it sound. It depends what words you use. For me, I take it as a bit of a pity point as well. Like I don't love pity points, but I have to roll with them as well as with the hate. So, but Twitch is kind of its own society almost. It can be so weird.
Yeah, it lives by its own rules.
Yeah.
And in the recent years, there has been a lot of talk about the game culture toxicity in different parts of media and game industry. Oh boy. Do you think that the perspective of people with disabilities has been raised enough in these discussions?
No, niet, ei, nay, nej. Never. Even in communities that I'm part of where it's allegedly welcoming and everyone is supposed to be together, you know, like I'm in the Discord of one trans YouTuber who I love and who I respect very much, and she herself is amazing, but so often in her comment section and in her Discord I have had the age-old question of, if you're blind, how are you reading this? And it's just like I don't want to deal, like, you should not be asking that question. And then, of course, you have the warriors of the internet who want to prove that I'm not blind by going through my YouTube channel and, like, pointing out videos where I do things that I should not be able to do based on some arbitrary definition of things blind people can and can't do. So, yeah, no, disabled people are completely left out of this discussion on pretty much every level, I would say, even from people who mean well, which is great. Super cool.
Agreed, but like I have a weird thing. I don't mind people asking me questions about my disability though. Like it's always been for me like ask questions rather than guess.
So I don't mind questions, but I do mind assumptions, if that makes any sense. So I don't mind like, hey, like, you know, how are you doing that? I'm sorry if I am bothering you or something, but like it's about how you phrase it. If you're just like, if you're blind, how are you writing it? And it's just like, go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a ways how to go about it without being offensive in a way. It's how you make it out.
Yeah, and it's a lot of like in online conversations, it's quite hard to not come across as offensive most of the time if you do it through text. It's so hard to read tones and like everything sarcastic and like that, you know.
No,
it's
hard.
It's different.
Yeah, it's hard to translate the speak to text. Absolutely. You have studied to be a data gnome, and Felicia, you work as a producer in animation studio Nopia. How well do you think the gaming and the ET industry shows diversity when thinking about people with disabilities? How could more people with disabilities be brought to these sectors, and in what ways could companies be made to recruit more people with disabilities? That was quite a lot of questions in one.
I'm gonna go ahead and have a hot take. There's quite a lot of people in Finland who work in accessibility, and none of them are disabled. So that should tell
Okay.
you a lot about the state of things. And I think there's a lot of gatekeeping for disabled people who want to work in different industries because there's a lot of fear on behalf of companies because they're not sure what to expect. There's also, prejudice, maybe even unconscious bias that people have. They don't even know that they have the bias, but they have it. There's a recurring theme. I have a lot of talented, skilled, disabled people in my circle who struggle with finding permanent full-time work for this exact reason. And, I've had well-meaning abled people tell me that, like, you can't say that because it makes it sound like you think you're not getting your job because of that, but maybe it is just your skills. And it's like, yes, I'm willing to accept that, like, I'm not the most skilled person in the world and that there are people out there who are more skilled than me and my friends, like, duh. But at the same time, you can look at the statistics yourself and see that disabled people are disproportionately represented in unemployment figures. And I have a hard time believing it's because we're all lazy and stupid, because we're not. It's that there's someone and some kind of barrier there that's not giving us the chance. And when it comes to accessibility, it's like, people would rather hire some kind of highly educated, many years master's degree in all kinds of stuff rather than someone who has to live with accessibility every day and think about accessibility and how accessible stuff is every second of every day. Like, we are the experts of our lives and the things that
And
we
without
use.
education.
But for some without education, but for some reason no one wants us. So I don't know what to think about that.
Melissa, you took words and phrases out of my mouth. So now I have to win this. So, like, my education is base level of IT. I applied how many places? 40 when I was graduating. Okay, so 3 of them answered back. 3.
Yeah.
And all 3 was like, we cannot take you as like employment because our place is not accessible. So, yeah, there goes that out the window.
Making it seem like it's your problem that they can't hire you. Yeah.
So, and my level of skill on my field is high. Like, back in the time when I was studying more, like that. But it wasn't good enough, so here I am streaming them.
Well, what could be done in the industry to allow more people to get into the working places then?
It's a hamster wheel, but you have to hire more disabled people and have a more diverse team, because once you start to have a more diverse team, then those inherent biases are less likely to come out. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big problem, I would say, in just the way Finnish recruitment is handled, because there's a lot of patting each other on the back in terms of diversity and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of concrete action. And the diversity to a lot of companies comes down to simply hiring more women, when that is not necessarily, of course, like, women are underrepresented in IT and games, and they do have things to worry about, and they should be represented more, but they're not the only group. And I think that is something that a lot of companies don't realize, that in the age of technology, especially when we're all working from home, being disabled, if someone can still use a computer, like, for example, when you're interacting with me online, you have no idea what I'm doing, how I'm doing stuff. All you notice is that my work is getting done. And I think that's the same for a lot of disabled people. So there just has to kind of be this click, this realization, and it starts with creating diverse teams.
There's nothing more to add to that. But
Sorry.
I don't mind. It's okay. I'm just here to affirm stuff you said because.
Thank you for validating me.
Sorry for validating it.
No, it's
We talked about this, but it's amazing that we can think so alike but so different at the same time.
But I think there are universal experiences that like pretty much every disabled nerd has dealt with.
Yeah.
And I think like regardless of obviously we are clearly very different people who live very different lives, but we have one unifying thing. And, you know, I think you'll find, or not you, but in general, people will find that the more disabled people that they come in contact with and the more disabled people are given platforms, the more these overlaps happen. And we would actually be a very powerful force if we all teamed up. But I think there's been a societal attempt to kind of silence disabled people for hundreds of years. So hopefully with the internet, we can finally be treated like human beings, which would be cool.
Indeed. Well, do you too have any tips for people with disabilities who wish to start gaming hobby or work in gaming industry?
Stand up for yourself. Stand up for yourself.
Don't be afraid to get yourself out there.
Yeah. You know what you're capable of. You know what you've been through. You know what you can do. You are capable of anything, regardless of what anyone in school has tried to tell you and any bullies or people around you have tried to say. You can do anything you want. Your future is just as valid as anybody else's. You are capable of anything. And if you want to be a programmer or an artist or whatever you want to do, you can do that. It's just about, you have to apply for school. You have to work hard. You know, obviously there's financial barriers for a lot of us, but thankfully in Finland, that is less of an issue. But like, you know, get active, join communities, be part of IGDA, be part of game jams, be part of We in Games, be part of these different organizations in Finland that exist to help you and get your foot in the door that way. And you know, as long as you are not afraid and are not afraid of you know, rejection, because you will get a lot of it, grow some skin that's thick and work.
And one other tip I can give you, don't like externalize yourself, like don't burn yourself out.
Yeah, you have nothing to prove.
Do as much as you can, but don't kill your life or your body with it.
It's so true. I think a lot of disabled people, we feel like we have to work twice as hard as everyone else because we don't want to be seen as disabled. So, you know, a normal abled person can go to work and have like an off day where they're just kind of slow and they're a bit tired. And like I've only recently learned to accept that like I cannot be 100 every day. Because I always feel like if I'm not 100 every day, then someone higher up is going to be like, oh no, see, I had a feeling, you know, blind people, and I like, it's this fear. And only recently have I learned to treat myself like the average middle-aged human being that I am.
Like, it's so hard to keep yourself, like, not overworking yourself, because I still feel that I have to like show people that I can, even though I know I can.
Same.
It's just like showing those people who don't believe that I can do it, even though it will cost me in the long run.
Same.
It's passion. Have a passion for the thing you do. It's the biggest thing. And when there's a way, there's a will. And there's a will, and there's a way. If you want to play games, then let's figure out what you can do to play them. There's so many resources.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, I guess we are getting closing up in here indeed. And I would like to thank you, Felicia and Absoli, for joining me on this interesting discussion. And I would like to thank you, all you watchers, joining us in this discussion and being part.